And welcome back here to Adobe Live, where today I am joined by the one and only Charles Carter, photographer, videographer, and he told me before we went live that he pretty much does everything else too. So wonderful. Good morning, Charles. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Really, really good, because I'm super excited, as always, with every guest to see and experience the photos that you brought with you today. But first of all, before we jump right into the stream, we have a couple of housekeeping things to take care of, because if you're watching this anywhere but on Behance, do make sure to come on over to be.net/Adobe Live. That's be.net/Adobe Live. That's where we are reading the chat, or that's where I am reading the chat and forwarding any questions and proposals and anything you want to say to Charles. So hop on over if you're not already watching there. And let's have a quick look at the chat over on Behance. So today we're joined by Andreas and Angus and Annika and Gareth and Kirsty and Abi and Sean and Stuart and Rick and many more people. So thank you so much for joining us. Today will be a photography, landscape photography stream, and we got a great guest because, Charles, you have been with us, I think, multiple times before, right?
A few times, yeah. A few times.
Wow. So I can't remember what we did last time. I think we did some videography even.
We did, yeah, video.
Felt like that was ages ago.
It was a while ago, though.
It's still March 2020, right?
I think so, yeah.
Right.
That's it, yeah.
And they're all saying hi in the chat. And Gareth asks, does Charles do After Effects?
I do After Effects.
But not today.
I feel like you're a big fan of After Effects from what I hear.
Really? Gareth, a big fan of After Effects? Sounds like a myth. Yes, all right. Thank you for posting the link. Sean, very kind. You posted your Behance. So I think it would be probably a good idea just for you to introduce yourself for people who haven't seen the past streams. And I think we can also take a look at your Behance, and of course, we'll do some editing. I won't do editing. Charles will do the editing. I will just sit here and do snarky comments while he does all the hard work. So should we just jump over to your screen and you can tell us a bit about who you are?
Let's do that.
Right.
Yes.
There we are.
Cool. So, hello. Yes, I'm Charles, in case some of you haven't seen me knocking about before. Today, I'm going to be talking about my travel photography. So I've been shooting for about 7 or 8 years now, and everything I've kind of learned has been self-taught. So I started out in travel photography, actually. I borrowed my mum's old 60D Canon camera for a week for a road trip. Obviously told her I was going to bring it back, and that kind of didn't happen until about 5 years later. So I just kind of went out, yeah. Poor mum. Sorry, mum. I did bring it back, though. I brought it back for her at Christmas like 2 years ago, which was a nice surprise for her. But yeah, so I kind of went out and just was playing around with this camera on road trips and just started really getting into photography and watched a lot of YouTube tutorials and just kind of developed from there. And now it's what I do full time: travel, take pictures, make videos, and yeah, it's great. I mean, so the plan today, sorry, go on.
No, I just wanted to say I think it's absolutely fantastic and amazing that you can today learn everything from the internet, most often even for free, like the stream today. Yeah. So, such a great time to be alive.
Hopefully I can share some knowledge that's worth keeping today.
All right. So, sorry, I interrupted you. Please continue.
It's all good. So the quick plan for today is I'm going to share some of my imagery, show you guys some pictures, and just have a quick talk about kind of my thought process when I do shoot and edit, and kind of go through that. Maybe have a quick little talk about the kit that I use, because I know that people always ask about kit. And then we're going to go through some edits and maybe let you guys choose a photo to edit if time dependent, which could be fun, I think. So what we can see here, I'll just jump straight into it. Is actually some photography from a trip to Dubai. We've got a few images here, actually. Let me just close this. Oh, wow, I didn't know you could do that. You just click and it goes through the imagery.
Well, there we are.
So when I edit, I tend to have a set process. So I'll bring everything into Lightroom and make my selects, and then do some basic sort of white balance adjustments to my imagery. And then I take it into Photoshop where I do the real editing sometimes. And then I bring it back into Lightroom and put a few more touches on it and then export it. But that's getting a bit ahead of myself. So if we're going to talk about photography, for me, when I shoot, one of the most important things is the frame. Like, it's all about the lines for me and finding the right frame. I don't really go out to shoot and sort of look for these famous Instagram locations that everyone else goes to and sort of takes the same picture. That's not really why I got into photography. I've always wanted to just kind of do my own thing and sort of take my own pictures. I didn't really like to think that I was just copying other people. So I'd hope that when people look at my pictures, they kind of think, oh, wow, I've not seen, or if they have seen this place before, it's kind of a unique perspective, which is something I'll always kind of say to people is, if you're going to go somewhere, find your own shot and find your own angle. I mean, there's like 100 different ways to take the same picture. An example here is, I mean, this is the Dubai Skyline, which you've probably seen many, many times. But I mean, all I've done is just frame it with, I think it was a part of my balcony, just like a small section of the trellis or whatever it was, which adds a little bit more depth. And I thought it adds a really nice little soft touch to the edges, which I enjoyed. I guess it's inside a hot air balloon, which was really cool. Didn't think I'd ever be taking pictures inside a hot air balloon, so that was an experience. A very rushed one. They were kind of just like, come.
Hopefully not too shaky.
Where am I going? And so that was cool.
Like, do you bring a tripod on a hot air balloon? Is it?
No, well, that was just a handheld image. I mean, that was the thing. A lot of the time when I'm shooting, it's not really, or most of the time it's not planned. I kind of just see something and I kind of have like an image in my head. I'm like, that would make a really cool picture. Like, I kind of frame it in my brain. I'm like, let's try it. And I'll just get the camera out and be like, cool, maybe I can do something with that. And then 5 months later, when I get home and actually edit it,
what have I done? Do you always shoot, because you mentioned Lightroom earlier, do you always shoot RAW with your images?
I do, yeah, always. Okay. I mean, I didn't at the beginning. That was a mistake. I had to learn the hard way. But yeah, I actually shoot a lot of the time, well, always shoot in RAW. And you have different picture profiles on the cameras. I only really use Canon. Well, I've only mostly used Canon, and I know that. So mine's set to the neutral profile, and I've taken the contrast down with some custom settings and a few other things. And that just means that when the image comes out, it's just as natural as it can be. You know, there's like, all the editing is there to be done by me. I don't like to have like anything sort of burnt into the image already. And the same, I mean, I'll show you when it gets into Lightroom as well, because you can have the different picture profiles within Lightroom as well, which kind of change the look of the image before you start editing it. So again, I go with like just the most natural default look I can. But yeah, that's kind of, for me, when I'm out to shoot, I just look for like original shots, look at the framing. I think a lot about the framing and the natural lines. And as well, another thing I found, or something that I learned actually from a good friend who's a very talented photographer, was about light and atmosphere, which is again, something I never really considered when I first started out shooting. But whenever I shoot now, I'm always looking for obviously like nice light or different light, something that just changes the image from what anyone could go there and just take on a normal day. So things like fog, I mean, golden light is great, you know, cloud coverage.
That's sort of weather. The quote unquote issue with landscape photography. You can't really change the subject. You just can't move them out. Like, could we have that one over there, please? Yeah. Unlike portrait photography or anything else, you really have to play with framing, lighting, and the just position in general. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah. And I mean, you could take this picture here like 100 different times, and depending on the light and the weather, and like if there's fog or clouds or rain or ice or snow, I mean, it's a different image every time. So you can just keep going back, and you know, if you go there one day and you think, I really want to take this picture, but it just doesn't look great, come back in the afternoon, come back in the evening, come back a week later, and maybe it will look completely different.
Totally.
A big pet hate of mine is having to shoot in broad daylight, actually. So I normally won't be shooting until like the evening of the early morning.
When you get these softer light.
Yeah, that's it. I love some nice, soft, warm light.
Nice. And in the chat, they're also saying this image is wonderful, shows the depth of the field and fab skyline at the vanishing point, and also shooting raw is better because you can bring back details in Lightroom Classic or Lightroom. By the way, you use Lightroom Classic, right?
I believe so. Yes. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yep. The quote-unquote old one.
Do I use Lightroom Classic? No, I do use Lightroom Classic.
Yeah. I mean, Lightroom Classic is great if you have tons and tons of images that you want to have locally on your computer. And of course, Lightroom Classic, for anyone wondering at home, it is feature complete, where Lightroom, the new one, well, I say new one, it has been out there for a couple of years, but yeah, still doesn't have all the features that you may expect from Lightroom Classic. And also they're joining, even more people are joining, they're saying, hello, they are epic. Is he using After Effects? No, we already had that question. Real questions, please, Gareth. Thanks. Great work, says Andreas. Yeah. And Kirsty says, I had to learn it the hard way too, I guess, with camera raw. With RAW. Okay. So now we're in a completely different scene. Where's this?
Yeah. So this is in Austria. These images here, actually, I've got them open here
Austria.
As well.
Yeah.
In a place called Plancy, which is, I mean, the whole of the Alps is just stunning. It's probably one of my favorite places to shoot. I could spend weeks and weeks driving through the Alps, just taking pictures and hiding from civilization. But this here, so this was, it's Plancy Lake. And I think a lot of people tended to go for shots on this little sort of boat dock here. But this was the mountain behind the lake. And I mean, you can look at the reflection there, it's just absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And the golden light was kind of coming in just over the top of the hills behind us and just hitting the tops of the like sort of cliffs here. And it was just beautiful. But yeah, I mean, again, it just shows how the light can change. And I came back to this location a couple of times and it looked different each time. But yeah, I mean, I won't go through all of my images because we'll be here all day.
Was this shot in the morning or?
This was in the evening.
Wow.
In the late evening, yeah. Just before the light disappeared, I think.
I mean, as everybody knows, sunsets just look just like sunrises. So no need to get up early.
The only thing is you're tired if you're trying to shoot a sunrise. For me anyway, I'm still half asleep.
All right, okay. And they're saying beautiful landscape. Yes, I agree. Ever thought of displaying that picture rotated 180 degrees? I mean,
that would be a bit
Gareth, Austria, not Australia. Woo! I'm here all day. Yeah.
We need a little we need a sound effects.
I mean, I do have one, but yeah, okay. Moving on.
Yes, moving on. So, I don't know if people are interested in the kind of kit that I used to shoot, but I'm going to talk about it anyway.
So what do you use?
So camera-wise, at the moment, I've been shooting with the same camera since 2018. So I've got a Canon 5D Mark IV. But before that, I had, like I said, a Canon 60D, which is like a very standard DSLR. And I shot with that for the first 4 or 5 years of my life as a photographer. It doesn't shoot in like very high megapixels. I mean, it doesn't really do anything fancy. I still had the same stock lens on it, which was 18 to 135 mil, which is the lens that came with it. It was absolutely beaten up and battered by the time I was done with it. It had been to some amazing places. So whilst I do shoot with, some newer kit now, I did everything that I think sort of set me up as a photographer with a bog standard DSLR. So I don't think kit is the most important thing. For me, it's all about framing and sort of your creativity and how you edit afterwards. But with that being said, there are some things that if you can sort of get them, they do help and make things easier. So, if you're going to go shoot on road, if you're doing travel photography, I think extra batteries are like a must for your camera, because the amount of times I've seen like the most amazing shot and they're like, cool. And my camera's dead. I'm like, exactly. A couple of spare batteries is great. If you're doing road trips as well, you can get these sort of chargers that sort of plug into the car and let you charge your batteries in the car. That's great. The lenses I use now, I have 4 lenses. So I have like a 16 to 35 wide angle lens, like a super wide. I have 2 prime lenses, so a 35 mil and a 50 mil. And then I have a zoom lens, which is a 70 to 300. And that for me, I'm normally either on the zoom when I'm shooting landscapes or the super wide, and they cover basically most of the bases that you want to frame with. And apart from that, I think I have an ND filter as well, which is great, which can bring down the exposure. So an ND filter sort of clips onto the front of your lens and lets you bring the exposure down when you're shooting. So if you want to shoot at a higher f-stop and sort of have more depth of field,
or longer exposure,
bring the exposure back down and get that image, which is great. And a polarizing filter as well is also really good. I think I used one here in this image actually. Sort of lets you bring the reflections back in and sort of bring the saturation and color back into an image when there's a lot of light, or on water as well. It lets you kind of change the transparency. So there's some really useful tools to play around with. So yeah, I think what I'll do now actually is stop talking about kit and maybe show you guys some editing.
But they're saying ND filters are really great too. Yes, especially if you want to get if you're shooting moving water and you want to get these super silky water effects.
Oh, yeah,
ND filters are really great to have. Although I must say I'm much more of a fan of those crisp and clear water shots, but that's just me. And they're saying nice and long exposure. Yes. All right. Okay.
Cool. So what I'll do now is I'll run you through kind of my process when I've set up a fake folder of images from a shoot. And I'll show you kind of how I set things up with like my folder hierarchy as well, because for me, it's super important to be organized. Like as I was talking to Tim earlier, I have like nearly 18,000 images in my Lightroom at the moment. And if I kind of don't keep on top of organizing those, then I've got absolutely no chance of knowing what was shot and where. So for me, whenever I sort of get a new shoot or like I've been on a trip, I sort of organize my folders into these three things here. So I have one from my RAWs. So that's where all the unedited, untouched images straight from the SD card go. And then I have a folder for edits. So that will be anything that's sort of brought into Photoshop and then brought back into Lightroom. And then finally a folder for my exports. And with these, it can either be just for a single shoot or it can be for an entire trip. And then so you can see here, I've got all my RAWs in there and these two are empty. So when I import into Lightroom, there are a few things actually I find really useful as well. Obviously I've got a folder here. This is just the import window. I always use add because that just then adds the images to Lightroom from where they're already set up instead of like copying them or moving them, which is super useful for me because I have them set up in like a hierarchy already before I import. You've got your preview settings here. So Smart Previews is really good. I don't use it because I've always got my images with me. But what that does is it sort of builds a smart preview of your image and saves it like on a cache on your computer. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim.
Sounds about right.
It lets you edit the images if you don't have them, essentially. So say I'd left my hard drive at home and I was out with my MacBook and I was like, oh, I feel like doing a bit of editing. I could just get it out and sort of edit those images. And then when I do reconnect that hard drive, all the edits will then be sort of downloaded. I don't know how to explain it.
That sounds about what I'm pretty sure people in the chat, like Sean, pretty sure he knows all about that. And also we had a question from Stuart. Just have to scroll up. Where was it? Can't find it. Was something about oh yeah, there we go. Have you ever used a drone and do you take still shots with that?
I have. There's one right here actually. So that image of Clancy was shot on a drone. So whenever I shoot drone video, I'll always shoot stills as well. Really, really great tool. A lot of the time I use the Mavic Air. I've always had the Mavic Air for years and years, and it's just a great little drone. You can just stick it in your pocket, go out, chuck it in the air and shoot and get some beautiful pictures. Can be a bit harder in lower light with that drone. You do get quite a bit of noise, which I mean, I'm sure you'll see. I'll show you that image in a little while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do shoot stills in my drone.
Okay. First things, Sean says, yes, you're correct about smart previews. Thank you, Sean. And also Anne asks, so what's the difference between adding and copying into Lightroom?
Good question. So adding, all that's doing is basically, you see how I've got the images in this little, so I've got my users, these are on my hard drive here and they're in my projects folder. When I add them, all it's doing is it's creating a path from those images where they are and sort of creating a connection with Lightroom. Whereas if I copy them, I'm pretty sure it will ask me where I'd like to copy them to. And instead of just creating a path, it will create a duplicate of all the images wherever they are, and then create a new copy wherever I tell it to, and then add that file path to Lightroom. Correct.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to trust you in this one. I'm not a Lightroom expert. So
yeah. I mean, basically, if you want to create copies, if you don't want to move them from where they are, use copy, obviously moves them to the new location, and add just creates the path. But add for me is what I use most of the time. Cool. So yeah, there are a few other things that you can do. So you can apply some settings during import before you even get them into Lightroom. I do have a user preset here that I've created. I mean, you've got color presets, all sorts of other things here, black and white, camera settings. All I've got set up, I think, is it should correct the orientation of the image and also remove chromatic aberration and put in lens profile corrections, which is something that I'll show you once we get in. But I do that on nearly every image. So having it as sort of an import preset just saves me time, which is really useful to have. And then with my metadata as well, I do go a bit overboard tagging my images. But here you can sort of add keywords and it just lets you search your images later on. I won't do it now because, I mean, it's just a little test folder.
Let's watch Charles adding keywords for the next time.
Today's
we're going to sit here and watch. Okay.
So you can see here, we've added in the folder now, and it's just going through and adding that user preset. It may not have done it. So you can see it's sort of corrected that. I did make one mistake here. I didn't add this option here. So when you lens correct, where is it? Or correct the transform, you want to use Constrain Crop. So all that's doing there is you see I had the white around the edge of the image where it sort of tilted it. That just brings it in and gets rid of it and crops it correctly. So you don't get that anymore.
Of course, if you want to desperately have those corners, you can use Photoshop to fill those transparent spaces in with content. And I think Photoshop, even if you crop it, has a checkbox for you to do that automatically. Unfortunately, not in Lightroom.
Not in Lightroom, unfortunately. So that's something I should add to the actual user preset next time. But, so let me see, where was I? Okay, library. Let me show you guys. Yes. So I'll quickly run you through just something that I found really useful when I'm making my selects. So it's kind of like the same process every time I import a new folder into Lightroom. So my MacBook here has been very loud. I'm going to move that away. So let's get all of the images up. So we've got all of my images here. Wow, that one has not had a good time. Sometimes the camera
nailed it.
Sometimes the camera data isn't really there for it to make that correction. So you just have to switch it off. I mean, it looks pretty level anyway. So I will use this process to make my selects very quickly. All I do is I go through and I use the flags in collaboration with these colors here. So I'll go through, if I like an image, I'll press P on the keyboard. If it works, nope, hang on. And it should make it, flag it as a pick. And all that means is once I'm done, we can, I'm going to make all of these picks because we might use those in a minute. Just filter out all the images we don't want really easily. We've got this image here.
I mean, you're moving at lightning speed here.
So I'm very picky. I know what I want. I mean, I'll just do this. I'll scroll through and I'll say I like that one. I do, I don't.
I mean, with over like 16,000 images, you have to be quick. Otherwise,
you do have to be quick.
We'll sit there for ages. And Stuart has asked the question about the drone. Never felt the need for a drone, but I've flown one, and the video guy used it for the company video inside shots and fly arounds. Yeah. Sure.
They're good fun. They're good fun. I mean, they're not 100% necessary, but you can get some angles that, I mean, you wouldn't really be able to get without sort of wings if you didn't have a drone. So I have got some nice shots.
If you're allowed to fly one at the location, of course.
Exactly. Make sure you check before you fly.
And Sean says, if you are loading photos into Lightroom Classic from your camera, Copy will write the raw images onto your hard drive or wherever you want the raws stored, and add the photos to Lightroom Classic.
Correct. Yeah.
There we are.
I don't use that option just because I always create folders before I add them in. So yeah, that's sort of the step I take. But it does do that for you, which is quite good. So yeah, I mean, once I've made my picture of the flags, I just use this filter here, and you can see it's just got all the ones that I've chosen with flags. And then all I'll do is I select all of them, and I set the color label as red.
I'm sure there must be keyboard shortcuts for that. I know that you can press 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 4. I
think for me it's 6, 7, 8, and 9, but I haven't figured out yet how to do it to all of the images at once.
Okay.
With the shortcut.
Anybody in the chat? Come on, people.
Someone help me out here.
Do some work.
And then once I've got them all set as red, I'll just go through again, flag all the ones I like from that selection, change them to yellow. And by the time I get to green, I've just got the images that I want to edit. So for me, it's a super, super useful way to just slim down huge shoots of, like, if there's hundreds of images very quickly. But let's get onto some editing, because I've talked a lot. I guess we should pick an image to edit. Let's see. Do we want to do the masking in Photoshop, or do we want to just do some basic editing?
Why don't we start with some basic editing and work our way up to the masking in Photoshop? Because Charles has a really cool photo where you will combine... No, I won't spoil it. Wait and see. All right. Sean says 1 to 5 are the stars, 6 to 9 are the colors, 0 are no stars. There we go.
Perfect. Stars are also very useful tools as well. I do love to use my stars. Okay, so so we've got this image here from Dubai. As I said at the start, I've got my chromatic aberration removed, which is probably not any on this image, hopefully. And then the profile corrections for the lens. So that just brings out, like, the warp, corrects the warp from the lens, especially if you're using a wide angle lens. It's quite useful. Kind of the first few things I'll do is just try to correct the horizon. So I just used that rotate there. I did the Constrain Crop and used it as grid lines just to straighten it out a bit. You can use the guided, which is super useful. You just draw a line, and you do need some more points of reference for that though, so I won't do that. Hold on, let's pull that back, put that in again. Cool, so we've done that, and then the first thing I'll do actually is put this back to neutral. There we go, that's better. So this is the most neutral settings that you can have. I've shot the photo in neutral. I've got the Adobe neutral settings on, and you can see it's just very, very plain. So I'll look at the graph here, bring the exposure up a little bit, bring up the shadows a bit, because there's quite a lot of shadow here. It's going to look like all I do when I edit is just move these around until it looks like I like it.
I mean, that's pretty much how you're supposed to do it, right? Move it all the way to the left. No, that's not it. Move it all the way to the right. No, that's not it either. Somewhere in between has to be the solution. And then
it's good to know that I'm not the only one who feels like they're just making it up as they go along when they're editing. But yeah, I was kind of going through my edit process, and I was like, all I really do is kind of just, like, wiggle the sliders until it looks nice.
Do I have a process?
I really like this Haze tool, actually, which was brought in, I think, was it the last year?
Oh, it must
I know it's a newer tool, right?
Like 2019, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. I think maybe a couple of years ago, but super great tool. Like, I don't actually fully understand how it works. I know it sort of brings down, like,
it is actually based on a physical model of mist. So it will analyze the image to determine the proper color of the fog or mist and try to remove that.
Wow.
So, and of course, you can also add some mist or haze back if you want more. And you will notice that it won't just add gray, it will actually add warm, sort of orangey-ish mist.
I've just seen that there, yeah, that's quite impressive actually.
And of course, in in Photoshop with the new neural filters, you will get depth-aware haze, where a fully grown neural network, can't even speak today, a neural network will analyze your image and add depth and haze based on how the landscape or the environment was. So further objects that are further away will get more haze, and objects that are closer will get less haze. But yeah, I don't think this one does it. This is just,
I mean, it's crazy how much Photoshop can do nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Very impressive. So when I'm doing just sort of the color correction and the white balance at the start, when you're doing your temperature, you always want to do that after you've corrected your exposure, because doing all of this stuff here, like your white balance and your exposure, can affect the warmth and tint of the image. So there's no point sort of correcting this, doing all of that, and then having to go back and do it again. So I always do the warmth and tint of the image after I've sort of done the exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, I mean, I don't really feel like it needs too much done to it. I mean, I might put the temperature up a little bit just for to change the look a little, but normally I won't change too much from what I shoot. Although this image here, which we'll see in a second, is very cold. So I would do a bit of correction on that. So once I've done that, I might play with my curves a little bit here.
They're already liking this in the chat, saying, wow, I like this image and this photo's awesome. Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. So all I've done here is really brought the shadows out more. I mean, I don't really want to put too much contrast in yet. There's a lot of shadows in this image. So if I press, if I press backslash, I think it's backslash,
nailed it.
It shows you the unedited image. So you can see how much already I've brought the shadows out. Obviously it's doing that because I think I had the import preset on it. But yeah, you can see how much, I mean, this is shot in RAW, so you can save so much of the image data from shooting in RAW. Once I've done this, I'll play around with my hues a little bit. I have in my head, I don't really use presets ever, because every time I edit an image, I do it differently. But they do sort of all end up looking similar as if I've edited them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess it's just kind of a look that I always sort of gravitate towards. And this is, I really do like my warm images with warm sunsets in them. So I've done the hues, saturation. See, I don't like to be too saturated either, so I bring the oranges up a little bit.
Seems like vibrance, the slider would be your friend there, because it can add saturation where these colors aren't already saturated. Because saturation will just add color everywhere, even if you have already very saturated colors. But vibrance won't do that.
50 saturation, and then if you add 50 vibrance, you can see it's more adjusted. It'll only add in undersaturated areas.
And I think
cool.
It should favor green and blue tones, and it will reject skin tones, so you won't oversaturate any skin.
I didn't know that. That's very good to know.
I
always tend to add in a tiny bit of vibrance at the start, and then go through the HSL sliders, and then if I want to add more vibrance in afterwards, I kind of have 3 steps. So there's always a chance at the end to sort of bring it up. I do tend to, as well, in images that aren't like this, I'll always undersaturate yellow because it's a very unappealing color sometimes, and the same with green. For me, I don't really like to have too many greens in my images. Bring that blue down a bit. And then luminance. So, to be honest, there's not too much to change at the moment with this. I've brought the shadows out and fixed the colors. This is a new feature as well, right? The color grading panel, or newish. So this is, for me, kind of similar to the Lightroom panel in Premiere, when you color grade your footage. And it just lets you sort of have another option for bringing out your shadows, highlights, and midtones, and adding a bit of color into the different regions of the image. So you could add a little bit of cold blue there to the mid-tones, or we could make it a bit warmer. I actually kind of like that colder look. I don't use these panels as much, if I'm honest. I tend to stick to the older features at the moment, but this is quite fun to play with now. So you see there the highlights.
Yeah.
I could add just to the sky at the top, different bit of tint. Kind of like that. I like that.
Gareth says Lumetri is also available in other pieces of software. The one I use. I'm pretty sure he's talking about Adobe Rush.
Yeah, that would be it.
That has to be it.
So now I've kind of got my like base image. Do I want to play with these? I might put a little bit of that in. So these are really good actually. I find these primaries, the calibration here. If you find your image is a little bit undersaturated in general, adding a bit of saturation here really can bring the image up.
I mean, it says calibration, so I'm pretty sure there has to be a technical reason why you would change those sliders. But honestly, if it looks better, why not play with it?
I feel like it's there to fix like
calibrating. Yeah, it sounds like something you should fix with your lens. If you have to change it, or your camera.
But nowadays, a lot of people use, I mean, back in the day, people would do this and post it to Instagram. Not anymore, thankfully.
Like the classic two-strip look.
That's it. I mean, you can, sometimes I push it a little bit over this way when it's like a very warm image like this. But now I've done that, all I'll do is I will quickly right-click the image, edit in Photoshop, and it should import it into Photoshop if my Mac wants to play ball with me. And
Vikram says we ought to have Charles to construct one university and we all can attend. All right. Yeah, we'll do that in the next stream. And Angus says Charles is great at explaining all this. And I agree.
So I'll keep this one brief because I would like to get onto another image. But all I've done here is import it into Photoshop and then Command J to duplicate that background layer, just so I've got that as a backup if I do anything silly. And I've got some actions that I've set up in Photoshop. So these are things that I tend to do whenever I'm editing landscapes a lot, and I've sort of saved them as an action. So all I have to do is click that, press play, and it adds a tone curve, a gradient map, and a LUT. I've also got one for frequency separation, but we won't be doing that today.
By the way, just a quick tip. If you don't want to select the action and press play all the time, you can select button mode. So you only have to click once. Mm-hmm. So if you open the actions panel and click on the hamburger icon in the upper right corner of that panel, there we are, and button mode.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you can even add colors. Of course, now you can't edit them. So to edit them, you would have to go back to, I think, panel mode or whatever it's called. But yeah, now you can just click on that. Of course, if you have actions that are really quick, you can just go boop, 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 and you're done.
I knew I was going to learn some good tips for Photoshop today. Yes. That's why I included it.
The one app I know more about you than anybody else, Photoshop. All right. Okay.
So I've got, I mean, you can see here, it doesn't really do too much. It's very subtle. I've got the opacity turned down quite low on a lot of them. I don't always include all of them either, but the gradient map here is just a nice orange and teal gradient. And then the color lookup is one of the presets, I think, from Photoshop. It's like Kodak. I won't go into it, I might lose it otherwise. 2810, I think. But again, it just adds a nice little bit of contrast to the image. So sometimes I'll do some dodge and burn, but I don't think we've got time for that. So all I'll do now, oh, no, we don't want to do that, is save the image. So Command Shift S to save as. I'll go to my edits folder. And then what I used to save as a TIFF. Some people may disagree with me, but I save as a PSD now. And the reason for that is if I ever want to go back and tweak the edit that I've done in Photoshop, I can, whereas with a TIFF, I have to start the whole process again. And I've just found it to be a lot more useful in the process of going back and changing images.
Right, just to keep a non-destructive nature.
Yeah, that's it. And Lightroom should hopefully automatically add that back in. Sometimes it does, depends where I've added it. sometimes it doesn't. So let's go to library, go to my edits folder. And yeah, there you go. So it's added that into my edits folder now,
Nice.
which is super useful.
Quick question from the chat, and I also was wondering about that. Would you remove the lettering from the shirt?
I was actually going to go over that. So what I would normally do is probably crop in, because I don't really like the framing of this image at the moment. I really enjoy my frame freeze there, my thirds. So I always trying to have like my horizon or some sort of point of focus over like a third or one of the crossings of the thirds. So I was going to see if cropping it in like this, maybe. And I've got a feeling.
Need to be careful with this so you don't get any tangents with the cheek of the person, so it doesn't peek through.
So
nice. That's
actually how I'd probably crop it, to be fair. So I'd always have this as my last step. Sometimes even I won't crop until like the export. But yeah, so I'd probably, if I wasn't going to crop it in, I would probably remove that lettering, But I just feel like this whole section here doesn't really add anything to the image. I mean, except for the side of some guy's head and, like you said, some lettering, which we don't really need. So I'll crop that like this.
Hashtag Roy in the chat.
Hashtag Roy in the chat. So now I've re-imported this back into Lightroom. I don't have any edits on this image. It's obviously sort of reset. It saved those edits from Photoshop and Lightroom in the first step. And now I've just got, again, like a blank palette or canvas even. But at this point, I won't normally do too much. I might do some of my selective edits. So if I'm going to do that, again, I'm going to do a very rough job here. But maybe I'll bring some of the exposure up on the Falcon, whose name was Ziggy, in case anyone was wondering. Very good Falcon, very well behaved. So I would probably do that. Maybe bring a little bit of clarity in. Bring the shadows out.
And yes, Catherine's saying, oh, you could clone it out. Yes, but you know, the crop tool is sometimes just such an underrated tool. Why the need to clone it out if you're cropping it out anyway? Yeah, you could do that. Let's just save yourself some work.
Exactly, or even better, just make sure it's not in the frame when you shoot originally. Save yourself more work.
Although with the resolution of the cameras, cropping isn't such a bad issue as it used to be. Like back in the day with the 1.3 megapixel cameras, where if you were to crop in, you could already count the pixels.
Yes. So, sorry. So yeah, if, at this point, I would add in like any of my radial filters, my what do you call these ones? Graduate filters. Maybe put like a bit of like, again, because I feel like there's not much added from this part of the image, so I might like add a bit of reduce exposure bit there with a graduated filter. It's really annoying me that you can do that.
I mean, I'm sure Ziggy has great personality, but I don't think he would be glowing that much. I'm pretty sure that is
quite easy to fix that.
You could use like a mask for that, aren't there? Masks based on luminance. Sean, help me out there, please.
So, I mean, we could just put on the auto mask.
Yeah, that's it.
Kind of clean up a bit, reduce it. Obviously, I'd normally spend a bit more time on this, but
I mean, I'm looking for the equivalent of blend diff in Lightroom. I'm pretty sure there was something like that.
So you do have an auto mask, which just sort of stays within the line. And with this actually, because it's quite a contrasted subject, it works a lot better. But sometimes if you've got like you don't have that, it can be a lot easier just to sort of just do it by hand. But yeah, that's quite easy to clean up.
Yeah.
Something else that I would add at this point is maybe some of my effects. So a bit of vignetting, the color priority. And that just, again, brings more of the focus in on the subject. Like, again, I don't feel like anything's really been added here. So I'll bring that right down, drop the feather.
Perfect.
Perfect. There we go. And that's my final image. Thank you for watching.
Now we will add a lens flare.
We'll put the feather back up and then do that down. But the reason I dropped the feathering down is just so I can see exactly where it would be. You can see there, it just sort of focuses us in a bit more subject. I do like to add a bit of grain as well. I'm one of those people. Very subtle. You can't really see it if you zoom in.
I mean, yeah,
but
if you ever add sharpening or if you ever add grain, do make sure to preview at 100% so you can actually see what you're doing, because I see a lot of people just adding grain and noise and wondering, why is nothing happening when they are at like 12%? And then once they zoom in, they think like, wow, this is so grainy. So yeah, if you're sharpening images or adding grain, make sure to zoom in to at least 200 or even better, 100%. Just, yeah, because now you can actually see the grain, like, wow.
So you can obviously play with the size, the roughness. The one thing about adding grain is it does kind of reduce the sharpness of your image. So if you're going for a super sharp image, maybe don't add the grain in.
For me, it's almost like you can fake some resolution when the image is slightly blurry if you add some grain.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I guess if you go too high, like if you zoom out, it kind of does, yeah. I guess it depends on how much you're adding in. But I don't really go for like a super sharp image look anyway. So yeah, I think, for me, maybe I would do a lot more like selective edits and stuff on it. But as like a starting point, I think that's a pretty good, good image to go with. From where we started, even it's a big change. We brought out a lot of detail. So yeah, that's a general process of what I do in editing an image.
Super cool. All right. We have about 14 or 13 minutes. So if you want to go to the composite image,
let's do that.
Let's do it now.
I'm going to find the one I want. So I think what I'm going to edit is...
They are effects that you add after you finish the image. So they are after effects.
Sorry, go on.
No, sometimes it's just... come on, guys. It's Monday, right? You can't... Right. Okay.
So we've got two images here. So I'm going to edit them in Photoshop 2021.
Wow.
Available in all good stores.
Available to Creative Cloud subscription near you.
So these two images are exactly the same frame. All I've done here is I wanted to get the image of Thomas here, who's a Finnish wilderness guide, very cool guy. This image was shot out in the Swedish archipelago. We spent a week wilderness camping and kayaking around, and this guy was our guide, a cook, everything. Great cook. He cooked a lot of amazing food for someone who was out in the middle of nowhere with a bonfire. And yeah, so I've got two shots. I've got an image of Thomas, and then I've got the image of the starry sky above him. But because of this bright light here, I couldn't expose for the starry sky, which was here. So I had to shoot one with him and one without to get the sky. So I'm going to copy this layer here into this image here. And I'm going to duplicate that as well and duplicate that just so I've got my backups here. We can hide that. So I use Command G just to hide that. Sorry, to group those two layers together and chuck them there. Okay, so on the bottom, we've got the image of Thomas. And on top, we've got the image of the starry sky. So I'm going to use masks to composite these two layers together and create a single image. So I've selected this layer with the starry sky and just added the mask here with the, I guess we would call that the mask tool.
Yeah.
And what we've got is a mask, and everything that's white is basically where the mask is at 100%, or 100% white means that the mask is fully, I guess, visible. So I'm going to take my paintbrush tool, put the hardness all the way down, and then change the color to black. And anything I paint black will then remove the mask. So it means it reveals the image underneath. So I'm just going to kind of paint in here, Thomas. Now, I mean, to be honest, I could just leave it like that, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, super easy. With a masking tool. I was, in my head, I was thinking like, okay, how will he do that? Will he use HDR workflows to bring those images together, blending modes? And you're just, layer mask, boop, done.
Do a layer mask. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of ways it could be done. But But for me, I think this just works super well. I mean, you could...
The face of that person is a bit overexposed. Do you think you could bring that back in Lightroom?
That's the plan. I mean, I was...
Oh, sorry.
No, you can bring it back. So the plan was... So essentially, I'm going to composite it here and then export it back into Lightroom and do my color corrections, or most of them in there. I feel like there might have been an image where his face wasn't overexposed, but for the sake of time...
I mean, was it actually overexposed, or could you get that back in Camera Raw? In Lightroom?
I feel like we'll find out.
Is that recoverable?
I mean, it's kind of blown out. We'll see. I feel like we could bring it down a little bit, but luckily he's quite small. So I think overall it's not going to be too noticeable, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, let's just see if there's any details there. No. So yeah, all I've done is just painted that part of the image black. If I want to bring some of it back, like these trees here, where there's a bit more detail, I'm just going to paint around him and do that.
Oh, yeah, that's clever.
That's it. So what I'll do now is I will press Command, Option, Shift E, and that just creates, it sort of merges, what would you call it? Like it creates a image from everything below.
Merge visible layers, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to do that, but it's just a nice way to kind of bring all of your work into sort of one layer.
You could also group it and use smart filters if you want to add any further adjustments, but yeah, that also works. Yeah,
so, I mean, you can do this with multiple images. Say I had another shot where I had this more exposed that I wanted to add in. I just add another layer. I could add another mask and just sort of reveal that area there and just combine as many images as I want. And there is another shot where I do that, but we don't have time to go over it. So all I'll do now is, again, Command Shift S to save as, bring that edit into my edits folder, save it as a Photoshop, and save. And this is where it's quite useful actually to save as a Photoshop. So if I wanted to go back and change the masking, or maybe do a bit of editing in Photoshop with the exposure and curves and stuff like that, I could go through some adjustments here. I could do that. But today we're just going to bring it back into Lightroom quickly and see what we can do there. So we go into Library, Edits, and then wait for the image to appear. Is that it? No, that's the one I test one I did yesterday. So hold up. Might need to synchronize the folder. Has it finished saving? There we go. It's just finished saving. There we go. It's appeared. Beautiful.
Nice.
Okay.
Adobe Cadabra.
So let's fit that there. We don't need this panel. I can leave. I don't think we need that either. So let's hide that. Okay. So now that I've combined the two images, I could have edited them separately and done color corrections in each one, but I kind of want them to match up a bit. So I'm going to edit them at the same time. The main thing for me here actually is reducing this starry sky and bringing it down a little bit. So I'd probably want to maybe even use a selective edit here. Just kind of paint this in.
But now, I mean, that goes to show how much I know about the Lightroom workflow. Do you still get the full raw image when you're editing now, or is this already some sort of JPEG version?
That's a good question. So it's editing the Photoshop file directly. So
because I don't think it's a smart object. You didn't go through Camera Raw. I don't think it's a raw image still.
So is there a better way to do that? Because I'm genuinely open to learning.
Thinking about the overexposed face, I think the best workflow for this would be to bring that down in Lightroom first and then have it edited. Okay, I think that's how. I mean, I don't know too much about that. So, Sean, maybe you know more. Let me know. Is it more wise to edit the face and bring it down first, or can we still do that and have all the benefits of the raw workflow? Because I know if you bring raw images into Photoshop, you first go through Camera Raw, which then converts it into a normal image. I think that's what's happening here, but I'm not 100% sure. See, there we go. We can recover more detail.
We can save it. So he is savable. Although
nice. I mean, this just looks like a local adjustment on his face, like boop, and done.
Yeah, this is, I think, so for some reason I used this process. I did do some research years and years ago.
Sean has an idea.
Could be wrong.
Go to the white balance and check if you still have the raw options. Okay. That's a clever trick, yes.
So develop, let's go.
Because if you don't have those, chances are you're working with the processed image, and then of course you can't bring back all the details. Like the overexposed face. You don't.
What am I looking for?
The white balance. No. If it had like the color temperature in it, then it would be the raw one. And now try to bring down the face and see if we can do that. No, I'm just curious. Sorry.
Yeah, no. It's
like wrecking your workflow.
No, it doesn't really work, does it?
There we go. Haha. Learned something today.
So I should have edited the images separately, color corrected them, or white balanced them. Yeah.
Well, probably just at least have the exposure right, because I think colors you can sort of get away with that. But the exposure not so much. If you bring down the exposure in the already compressed version or the processed version, you will, just get gray instead of the actual color. There we go. Learn something new today.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much.
Nice.
So from now on, I need to. I guess it would make sense. Yeah, I can leave the color to the last step, but I guess do my white balance and sort of exposure.
I mean, since it's all pretty much dark around that person anyway, you will probably still get away with the masking, even if you edit the images differently.
Yeah.
Whereas with
we'll pretend that we didn't do that the wrong way.
That was one way. Now we will show you a different way. That's equally valid.
I'll show you the way that doesn't bring back as much detail.
Well, that's how we learn. That's how we learn. We try, and that's how I encourage everyone to try out the Adobe apps. Just see what it does. Try a different way, and if it works better, well, that's the way you do it. And there's no.
I mean, when that's just a cool little way to sort of if you're trying to shoot something and there's a super overexposed section and a super underexposed section, just put it on a tripod. You can shoot both of them separately, so expose each one correctly. So I did the one with Thomas first, asked him to step out, and then I left the tripod there and just pressed the button again and did a long exposure for the night sky, and then you just combine them in Photoshop. But before you combine them in Photoshop, make sure you correct the exposure in Lightroom first.
Nice.
And then export into Photoshop. But yeah, without that little technique, I would either have just an image of Thomas sitting there in the dark with a lamp, or a very beautiful night sky on its own. But together, I think they make a much more interesting image.
Yeah, totally. And Mike says, raw is awesome when it's fresh. Yes. Okay. And I wanted to say something, but now I forgot. That's all right. It will come back to me.
we can come back to it. So with an image like this, I think something that I really like to do with night skies is to just bring down, it's like that. You press O actually on the keyboard when you're using selective, what do we call these? Adjustment brush. And it obviously highlights the area that you've selected with it. So actually, I think curves would be better to adjust this night sky, wouldn't it? Which you can't do with the adjustment brush yet. So I probably should have, again, done that in Photoshop.
Or even earlier in the Lightroom process.
Yeah.
The raw image, because I'm pretty sure there would be detail left in the stars, which you can bring back.
Yeah. So this is a big flaw in my...
maybe you can save it if you use a larger bit depth of your image. Because I think the default is 8-bit per channel. But if you bring it up to 16 or even 32, maybe you could save it like that, but I'm not entirely sure. I usually don't work with 16 or 32-bit images, at least not in Photoshop.
I think, what did it say it was in Photoshop? Let's see. 16-bit.
16-bit, oh, there we go. So at least you're saving more color than just the standard 256 colors per channel. All right, and just as a time update, we are pretty much done. So any last edits, it would now be the time to do them, and then we will already have to say goodbye for today.
That's okay. I think, it would just be some color tweaks and sort of adjusting the night sky. But I think the important thing was just kind of sharing the process of shooting those two images and sort of blending them together.
And then I have just one last question. How do you prepare the images for social media? Because I'm pretty sure you can't just post a raw file to Instagram, right?
No, you can't. So actually, I did some research on this the other day, and I learned some new things. So basically, when you upload to something like Instagram, it's going to compress your image, and you're going to lose sharpness in that. So something I learned was that when you export, first of all, you kind of want to over sharpen, and you do have some really great sharpening tools here in Lightroom. So I think it's the Option key. Does that, which lets you kind of see if you're going to bring noise into it.
Probably have to zoom in a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's quite a dark image, so there's not really going to see much.
Oh,
here.
there we are.
Lets you see when you bring it in noise, and you can also use the masking, which masks out the areas that aren't really that detail orientated, and just lets you focus the sharpening on the subjects.
Yeah.
Which is a really useful tool, which if you hold down Option whilst you're doing that is what brings up that alternate kind of view. So I'm just doing a very quick job of this. So you want to kind of over sharpen here, and then when you go to export, right click, export, some settings you kind of want to do, and this is just from what I read, is first of all, you're going to have double width, because if you think about it, Instagram's going to compress and reduce the image anyway. So if you give it to them at double width of 1080, at least then it's prepared for the future. So say they want to do want to display it in a larger area, it's going to still sort of maintain its detail. Resolution of 72, don't enlarge, resize to fit. And then here, your output sharpen for screen at a standard amount, which is, again, because it's just going to be used on screen. Yeah. If you're going to export it and use it somewhere else, like for print or sort of any other use, you can obviously change that, and you might not want to use the sharpening for screen. And then, yeah, that's pretty much my settings for export. It's just to sort of overcompensate with the sharpening. So then when it does get compressed by the Instagram, whatever they do to it, it still sort of hits that mark of being sharp, as opposed to losing its sharpness.
Very cool. All right. Okay. Yeah, no need to export that right now. And of course, with the sharpening, the masking is really great, because what you don't want to do is to sharpen any noise or grain in the image. That's what you don't want. So only sharpen the image, the subject, or any landscape. And with that, I think it's time to wrap up for today. So let's go to the big cam. Hello there. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you, Charles, for walking us through the gear you use, some of the projects, and the two images. And also, thank you to everybody in the chat who was watching the stream and commenting in the live chat on Behance. So if you didn't watch this on Behance, on Wednesday, where we have a Pride Shoot masterclass with our one and only Sophia Emmerich, and I think 3 guests, do make sure to come on over to Behance. I will put the link on Wednesday in the chat. And also, thanks to our wonderful chat. And they're saying, great, thank you both. Learn loads with Charles streams. And enjoy streams with Charles. Always learning like the rest of us, and keep it real. Yes, that's why I enjoy Adobe Live. Even the guests can learn a thing or two on stream. So, I'm saying thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks both. Thank you, Charles and Tim. Have a great day, everyone. Yes, I can only agree. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day. We will see you on Wednesday, the Pride Shoot Masterclass, and another stream on Friday, which will be all about... Come on, schedule, load. Yes, editing for TikTok with Margarita Innocenti. So I think Joe's hosting that one. So do come back on Friday if you want to learn more about that. But that's it from us over here today. See you on Wednesday, and Charles, have a wonderful rest of your day. And
thank you very much,
hopefully we will have you back on Adobe Live very soon. That would be lovely. All right. Well then, bye everybody.
Bye.